Welcome all. Bienvenidos. This is our talk about the usage of Bitcoin as a legal tender in El Salvador. We have here Andrés, I'm sorry, I forgot your last name.
Mejía.
Mejía. And we have here Andrés Mejía and David Baxter. Andrés estuvo en El Salvador en los últimos días y estuvo viendo cómo afectaba el uso del Bitcoin en la gente allá. Andrés was in El Salvador and he was watching and seeing how this usage of the Bitcoin affects the people in El Salvador, and he is working on a short film about it. And David works with the Bean Coffee. I'm sorry, how is the name again?
It's Bean Chain Coffee. We're starting a collaborative learning space where people can come and learn about blockchain in our coffee shop, and creating the Blockchain Learning Center where people can learn about that online as well.
We are very grateful to have you here and hope you have a great time.
So David, do you want to kick it off with some questions to Andres? I know you've had some burning questions. I'll let you get started.
Oh yeah, I mean, I was really curious as to how people feel on the ground about adopting Bitcoin in El Salvador.
So yeah, basically I felt the same thing. Essentially, just as a quick overview, I'm not a formal journalist. I'm not a financial advisor or like economist or whatnot. But like basically all of these, the implementation of a new currency basically implies all these different points of view that you can kind of see everything, see these different perspectives. So like I would say most of the people that I encountered, so just to kind of give a quick overview, I intended to be there for 10 days in March, and I spent 10 days in El Salvador. And 10 days I didn't really get like the whole lot of like the feel for, I mean, it's a relatively small country when you look at it in the map, but there's actually a lot of cities, and I think it's about 6 million people that live in the country. So it's quite a bit. And I would say that most people have heard of what Bitcoin is, and they have a general understanding that it's this form of electronic digital money, but most people have no real, there's no education really, or there's not a lot of education in terms of what it represents, what it means. People just see it as another form of money, essentially. And I would say that at least from my perspective, most of the people that I spoke to were, curious at least, they were interested in knowing what it is, but everyone does, or for the most part, people see it as this very volatile asset that, it's not really a store of value, because if you put money in it, it may be up one day, but it may be down as well. So yeah, I don't know if you have any specific questions.
Yeah, so the adoption's been a little bit tumultuous so far, sounds like.
Somewhat, yeah, somewhat. So I kind of prepared a few slides. I don't know if you'd like to do that now. It would probably take me, it's about like 20 slides, so it's quite a bit, but basically kind of touching on all the points to kind of give a general overview of the whole situation, and then we can kind of do, more specific questions. I don't know if that would.
That'd be great.
Can you share the slides? Are they public?
Yeah. Well, actually, I can, but I wasn't prepared to do that right now. But I could share my screen. I don't know if that.
Yeah, that's fine. We can. We'll just let people know that you might share them out later.
Absolutely. Yeah. No. Definitely. So let me see. We did go through this over earlier today.
So, why do you bring them up? I'm just curious about something. Does El Salvador have hyperinflation? And I'm just curious, Eileen, do people in Argentina look at Bitcoin as a store of value? Because if you have hyperinflation, I would think it's a different story.
So the people in El Salvador, as far as I understand, actually they generally use dollars, US dollars. And this was a switch that they made. They originally had their own currency that is called the colon. that was issued by their central bank, and they stopped using that in 2001. So I don't know if you can see my screen.
Mm,
Looks
not
great.
right now.
Yeah.
Yep, totally.
Awesome. Okay, cool. So yeah, so this is just a general overview, but here are some of the points. So essentially, yeah, socioeconomic background. So El Salvador ranks 124th among 189 countries in the Human Development Index. In addition to high rates of poverty and gang-related violent crime, El Salvador has second highest level income inequality in Latin America. From the late 19th centuries, El Salvador endured chronic political and economic instability characterized by coups, revolts, and a succession of authoritarian rulers. Persistent socioeconomic inequality and civil unrest ended in the Salvadorian Civil War from 1979 to 1992. This is in part one of the reasons why their currency started to devaluate. Right, they had earthquakes, they had a civil war going on, so basically that means that all these institutions were printing out a lot of money to pay for all kinds of different things. So essentially in 2001, the Supreme Court of El Salvador legislated into effect to make the US dollar legal tender in an effort to safeguard the financial sector from high inflation and monetary volatility. So the legislation promised to strengthen the local economy and facilitate commerce by maintaining low rates of inflation. This is achieved at the cost of removing their central bank's ability to implement monetary policy. So since then, they can only control the economy through fiscal policy, through tributes or subsidies, as they are unable to emit currency. So this essentially meaning that they are running with the US dollar as their monetary policy. So if the US decides to print more money, they don't really get any of the benefits, right? Just an overview, remittances. More than 20% of El Salvador's GDP comes from remittances, meaning that a large part of the population depends on money transfers from outside of the country. Through traditional finance service providers, the cost of remittances from the United States to El Salvador can be upwards of 40% of the value of the transfer. In addition to the difficulties and costs related to time needed for collecting physical money. This means, for example, people have to go to the bank on their days off. A lot of people don't have their own personal vehicles, so they have to take public transport. Once they actually pick up physical money, right, they have to transport it to wherever it is that they keep it. And, this does create some problems. So 70% of the population in El Salvador does not have a bank account and does not have access to financial services.
Wait, can I have a question there?
Yes.
I'm curious about that 40% number, because I can send money into Afghanistan or into Myanmar and only pay a Western Union fee of maybe 5% or less.
Correct.
Curious why El Salvador is so high.
So actually, a lot of times it is that. So for example, if you're going to send $1 million, right, or say $2,000, it's not going to be 40% or even 20%. Now the up to 40% is when these are smaller amounts. And the reason for it, as far as I understand, is because there's certain costs involved in making money transfers. When you're sending $5 or $10, right, the fees could be, $3, $4, depending, and that's basically what it is. It's not really that you would charge, these money transfers would charge you 40% out of $1,000. Many of these cross-border transactions are considered micropayments where transaction costs increase. But what I did want to point out is that the 70% of the population of El Salvador does not have a bank account. So that means that they can't even receive deposits if they wanted to. So each year, Salvadorian immigrants send $6 billion home in remittances from places like United States. It is estimated that 2.2 million people of Salvadorian origin live in the US compared to the 6.5 million in the Salvador itself. Because people can transmit Bitcoin to relatives and businesses on their smartphones without the need for a bank account to move. The move to make Bitcoin legal tender could help achieve the moral imperative of financial inclusion and provide a space where some of the leading innovators can reimagine the future of finance, potentially helping billions around the world. Now, this was a quote. The quotation marks come from a speech that was given by the president, Nayib Bukele. So this is kind of like the official declaration or the official posture that the government has. So this is also something relevant, right? So in developed countries, we're kind of used to, we have a certain level of accessibility. So for example, we use services like Zelle, or online quick Cash App, right? Or Quick Pay and stuff like that, where we can send money from one bank to another without any, in general, without even transactions. If I send $500, you would receive $500. However, in El Salvador, banks use closed systems that don't interoperate with other banks. So what that means is that in order for me to send money from one bank to another, I would basically have to write a check, and that check needs to get cleared by the other side, or I would physically go to the bank and withdraw cash and walk to the other bank and deposit it. There is no such thing as a payment, a transaction that can be made from one bank to another. And I believe there are like 4 or 5 like national banks. Right, so there's limited accessibility for people that don't meet the financial institutions criteria, such as low income, no credit history, high fees, whatnot, right? If you're making $10 a day, which is a normal salary, I would say, for the service industry and whatnot, chances are you're not going to be able to afford the fees that the bank establishes for having a checking account. Cross-border payments can take up to 3 days if multiple intermediaries are involved, and money transfer operators, such as Western Union or MoneyGram, have operational costs that can get passed on to the user. What happens here sometimes is that these costs are just a flat rate. They're not even a percentage of the, so that's where, like what you were mentioning, Golda, you would see that, you know, that difference of like the cost of that transaction.
Yep.
So I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm glad, nothing, I'm sorry. I like that you see the Lightning Network, because I was about to say Bitcoin has some pretty high fees too, but not on Lightning.
Oh, yeah. Correct. So I imagine that most people that are going to be watching this have a general idea of what Bitcoin is, but just as a quick overview, Bitcoin is the first cryptocurrency, right, powered by blockchain technology. So Bitcoin is both, one, a digital asset with a high liquidity profile, which essentially means that it can be traded quickly through any online medium. You can do this digitally and trade it for different assets. And two, it's an open global monetary network with a fixed monetary policy and open source code that optimizes for censorship resistance, decentralization, and security. This means that the protocol is transparent and verifiable by all parties. However, due to transaction verification process, transactions on the blockchain tend to be slow and expensive. So like you said, yes, correct. A Bitcoin transaction on the blockchain generally takes about 10 minutes to 5 to 10 minutes to verify. And it generally does also become a little expensive. So the Lightning Network is a protocol built over the Bitcoin network to optimize for payments with no intermediaries that are instant, cheap, and cash final. So essentially, it's a form of, right, it's like a layer 2 solution that has been provided that manages to send the Bitcoin from one place to another in a more localized network that is significantly cheaper and quicker, essentially instant. So passed on September 7th, 2021, the Bitcoin law makes BTC legal tender alongside the US dollar. So the law states that its use is optional, but must be accepted by all vendors when offered as a payment. However, they don't need to keep the Bitcoin. With the click of a button, they can turn it instantly into US dollars. It is unlawful to charge a premium for things paid for in Bitcoin. It can also be used to pay debts and taxes. It's important for the government to retain the US dollar as legal tender, in part due to Bitcoin's price volatility. So this means essentially that what's happened is, well, this is actually the explanation, but the government set up a fund of $150 million that essentially acts as a like real-time liquidity that will, to put it somehow, you can switch Bitcoin to US dollars instantly through their application. So what they're doing is they're removing the element of the volatility of Bitcoin. So the custodial wallet implemented by the government allows for transactions through the Lightning Network. All users through the app have two balances, one in US dollars and another one in Bitcoin. Money can be transferred between these balances, and the receiver of payment decides if they want to be paid in Bitcoin or in US dollars. So for example, if I want to pay in Bitcoin, goods or service, say I go to a pharmacy and I want to pay with my Bitcoin wallet, the service provider, the say pharmacy, they don't have to receive Bitcoin. They can choose to receive US dollars. And what's happening there behind the scenes is essentially the government is holding the Bitcoin, and the government is providing this liquidity so that they receive dollars. So this is all done automatically and instantly. So basically, this is the way that they get around. Most people that are transacting with this Chivo wallet from the government are actually doing that. Despite the fact that maybe the money that they're receiving is Bitcoin, no business is required to hold the Bitcoin. They just have to take the payment, and they can choose to. So in this wallet, the value of the Bitcoin balance will fluctuate as Bitcoin goes up and down or down in price, while the US dollar amount that you have will kind of remain there. And you can always switch from one to the other. So say you have $100 in Bitcoin and $100 in US dollars, you can seamlessly transfer from one to another. And that's part of what the government created this fund for, so that you have that option, that liquidity. So the government will assume price variation volatility. They created a $150 million fund to provide liquidity and back BTC to USD conversions in real time. So here are some of the objectives that they've declared by making this Bitcoin legal tender. Essentially, one of them is low-cost cross-border remittance payments, digital payments infrastructure for goods and services. So this means anyone can receive or send money without having to register a business, or having to provide documentation to a bank service. They can just automatically have a wallet that sends or receives money. Attract foreign investment, reduce reliance on the US dollar. Like I said before, the US dollar is their currency for everything, and they don't have monetary control. They don't have monetary policy on it. They don't really decide when this is, when US dollars are going to be issued. That's decided by the Fed. Boost domestic consumption, and to be on the forefront of a decentralized monetary system. That's what Bitcoin represents in a sense. So speaking of the implementations, the government of El Salvador offered every Salvadorian $30 in Bitcoin after verifying their identity in the app. This was done by submitting a photo of a government issued ID and a facial recognition selfie. Reportedly, there were issues with identity theft to collect the sign-up reward, and many Salvadorans spent the $30 in Bitcoin at grocery stores to later forget that the app existed. A lot of people basically just signed up, took the money, used it, and whatever. Apparently there were lines at supermarkets and stuff like that, where people were just spending $30 and then they just never opened the app again. And this, was bound to happen, since when they launched this whole project, there wasn't a lot of information. A lot of people didn't really even know what it meant. They just basically thought, I have $30 that I can spend, and I'm going to spend it. More than 200 Chivo ATMs and 50 kiosks have been installed in the country to withdraw and deposit physical cash from the Chivo wallet. As far as I understand, there is no cost to withdraw cash from your digital wallet. So anti-money trafficking processes, including payment analysis and monitoring, have been implemented as well. So there is some kind of oversight. This is not like an open, you're not using the blockchain, like we said before, to make these transactions in Bitcoin. These are all being done through the Lightning Network, And as stated before, the government does have essentially they're taking they're using, to put it somehow, it's essentially a central bank, but running on Bitcoin, because they do have IDs on wallets. And this is also, I imagine, so that multiple people don't, use or create more and get the $30 bonus and whatnot. So the government announced that $1 billion in Bitcoin-backed bonds to be issued in 2022 will be partly converted to Bitcoin and partially used to finance the country's Bitcoin mining operations. They've also promised large development plans throughout the Western region with Bitcoin City. Bitcoin City is a project that they're talking about right now. And it seems kind of crazy because we're talking about millions and millions of dollars of infrastructure and development and roads and all kinds of things that just kind of seem, seem a little far-fetched at this moment. But this is basically how the plan is going. And so far it's received quite a lot of attention. The first 10-year issue, known as a volcano bond, would be worth $1 billion backed by Bitcoin and carrying a coupon of 6.5%. Half of the sum would go to buying Bitcoin on the market and the other half in Bitcoin mining infrastructure. Other bonds would follow. So this is an update from just now, from less than a month ago. El Salvador has 1.5 billion demand for its $1 billion Bitcoin. So it seems like they're doing pretty well. In terms of Bitcoin mining, due to the current market valuation of Bitcoin, it becomes increasingly profitable. This becomes an incentive for the energy sector to develop sustainable energy infrastructure that does not compete with a citizen power supply. The government plans to set up a mining operation powered by geothermal energy. It seems like geothermal energy tends to be one of the cleanest forms. Essentially is heat derived below the Earth's surface, which can be harnessed to generate clean, renewable energy. This vital clean energy resource supply renewable power around the clock and emits little or no greenhouse gases, all while requiring a small environmental footprint to develop, and it's fairly cheap also to maintain. It's expensive to set up, but once it's running, it's basically there for good. So some of the criticism they've received for this move has been from the IMF, that has urged El Salvador to give up Bitcoin as legal tender, highlighting large risks associated with the use of Bitcoin on financial stability, financial integrity, and consumer protection. Another part of the criticism that they've received is that the political opposition has expressed concern over the lack of transparency and accountability through official communication channels regarding the public money used for Bitcoin purchases and treasury logs. We have to remember that the money that they're using for these funds and all this is public funds, right? So normally there is some kind of accountability provided. In this case, as far as I understand, they're not really providing much of that. So here, some of the risks, and these are presented by private companies that are financial institutions. Obviously, they have an interest in the matter. So, recent legislation establishing Bitcoin as legal tender would increase financial institution regulatory, financial, and operational risks, including the potential of violating international anti-money laundering and terrorist financing standards. This is what Fitch Rating says. Moody's Investor Service has downgraded the government of El Salvador long-term foreign currency issuer and senior unsecured ratings. The main drivers were market access for the sovereign is likely to remain constrained ahead of a challenging debt amortization schedule beginning in 2023, which means essentially that they have debts that they need to pay off in 2023 that are estimated, and they have to pay those in US dollars, right? Not in Bitcoin. So the fact that they've been buying all this Bitcoin leaves them with a smaller reserve of US dollars for these type of situations. So that could cause some kind of problem down the line. Unless, I mean, if the price goes down, that's basically what it is. Because if the price goes up, they can always sell that. They can always sell a part of their Bitcoin and make profit. And yeah, so this is pretty political, it seems, in my personal opinion. So a little bit of US dollar inflation. In an effort to blunt the economic effects of the coronavirus pandemic, the US Federal Reserve has dramatically expanded the supply of circulating US dollars, as measured by the M2 money stock, from the 15.35 trillion in February 2020 to 21.76 trillion in February 2022. That's an increase of 38%, unprecedented in the modern peacetime US history. While the Fed's extraordinary measure succeeded in pumping more cash into the coffers of US financial institutions, the stock market, and other aspects of the US economy, the same was not true for Salvadorians, whose banks did not receive infusion from the Fed, but did lose purchasing power due to US monetary inflation. This is, to sum it up, essentially it means that when the Federal Reserve prints money, that money goes here into stimulating the economy, into infrastructure, into private companies, but that doesn't get to El Salvador. So all they get is essentially inflation. They don't really get anything else, any benefits from it, as the US does.
Yeah.
So here are basically the takeaways. One of the goals of the Salvadorian law is to embrace Bitcoin as a neutral store of value for savings. By leveraging their existing free trade zones, the government can further its goals of attracting foreign investments and building a crypto-friendly ecosystem. Of course, it's important to keep white-collar criminals and other bad actors engaging in fraud and money laundering out of the space. To combat this type of activity, authorities operating the free trade zones must invest in creating a security body capable of vetting all businesses and investors, while also monitoring and investigating suspicious transactions. One of the main objectives is to expedite interoperability with this open international monetary network and provide financial inclusion to the unbanked population of the country. And this implementation allows anyone with a smartphone to send and receive global payments at a fraction of the cost that the legacy financial system offers. Yeah, so some of the current uses. Despite the majority of payments still being cash, and US dollars transactions, Bitcoin and the Chivo wallet are being used to pay for almost everything in certain communities. Residents can use the cryptocurrency to pay for goods and services, pay utility bills, receive salaries, and even issue educational grants to students who pursue a college education. In the locality of El Sonte, local school bus rides, lunch, and snacks are paid for in Bitcoin. Vendors can take digital payments and use the wallet balance to pay for goods or withdraw cash from a Chivo ATM. This is kind of just a photo, but you can see, for example, street vendors that will use their phones as a form of utilizing this. So you could buy, for example, I mean, I physically did that when I was there, you know, a can of Coca-Cola, you know, with Bitcoin, which sounds a little weird, but we all have cell phones, right? And there is no operational cost. There is no transaction cost. You basically pay $2, they receive $2. And this applies for any vendor, really. So, you know, Visa and MasterCard, I believe they charge 3%. American Express charges 3%. This is, you know, it's pretty significant, I would say. And, you know, it's still obviously not being implemented completely, but it's slowly getting there. This is some data that I picked up recently, and this is during November and December. Remember, the law passed in September of last year. So November and December of last year, El Salvador has seen tourism increase of 30%. On average, visitors have also been spending more as prior to the actual data. It was estimated that profits from tourism would total 800,000 from the adoption of Bitcoin, but the ministry reported figures were closer to 1.4 million. And then this is a survey a survey conducted on 337 companies between January 15 and February 9 of this year by the Chamber of Commerce of El Salvador. And they found that 92% of firms stated Bitcoin has made no impact on their business. 86% say that they never made a Bitcoin transaction, and 13.9 had made Bitcoin transactions. So the adoption is still pretty slow. It's still pretty low, but it's, you know, it's kind of getting there. And yeah, these are some just sources, but that's pretty much, you know, pretty much it. And that kind of tells like a general idea story. I think the really relevant part here is the idea that despite the fact that all vendors and all businesses need to, or by law, I don't want to say obligated, but they are mandated to accept Bitcoin. They don't have to keep the Bitcoin. They can just simply get paid and switch that immediately into US dollars, which allows for people, for example, that are actually doing microtransactions. You can do 25 cents, 50 cents. That was not possible with the previous system. Visa or MasterCard won't process a 5 cent, right, or 50 cent payment because it's not in their interest, because there's a service that they need to provide in order to validate these transactions, versus with the system, it's essentially done on its own by technology, and it verifies the transactions. And, you know, obviously the government has put in place an operation to oversee this whole situation, but that's, yeah, I think that's I'm gonna go back to you.
Oh,
And
That was amazing.
Yeah, that's so fascinating. There was so much in there I did not know.
that's
Yeah.
awesome.
And I personally have tons of questions. I'm sure you guys too as well.
Shoot, I'm gonna tweet this whole thread. I just tweeted a summary of what you said as a thread. I'm gonna start a new thread with your questions, David. So yeah, go for it.
Well, I just wanted to start saying it sounds like a lot of good things are coming out of this too, like development in the energy sector and innovations on the current blockchain technology to make it a little bit quicker to kind of band-aid some of the inefficiencies that Bitcoin has, the slowness and the expense. And it sounds like it's providing more utility to a lot of people that really need it. I was curious, are they doing a lot to help educate people on how to use this technology and use it safely to keep track of their passwords and protect themselves? Are there initiatives for that?
There are. So for what I understand, the government has been putting in place, besides the fact that they have multiple call centers, so there's like a technical support for this wallet that they've implemented, but it is a custodial wallet. So essentially you don't have, once you sign up with the government's wallet, Chivo, you don't have to put it somehow, your personal, your keys, right? The government basically has it, and you can always exit, you can always withdraw. The other interesting thing is that they've made the Lightning Network is actually compatible with other wallets. So for example, this is 100% compatible. All of the businesses in the network of the Chivo that they've created are all compatible with, for example, Moon Wallet or Wallet of Satoshi, or even Bitcoin Beach Wallet, which are all Lightning Network wallets. So that is also very interesting that you can, to put it somehow, you can interact with other things, and you can also send your money out of your Chivo wallet, right? It's not, you don't have to keep it there. What the Chivo wallet does is this backed, it has this built-in backed fund of $150 million, where they will give you that liquidity to instantly switch from dollars to Bitcoin, where you don't have to take that volatility risk. And this is very, very, very essential for a lot of people. Like I said, for example, in the case that you get paid $10 a day, you're depending on those $10. You can't afford to lose, 20% or 10% just because, right, the market went up or down. And that's very key, in my opinion. That's the only way this works.
Absolutely. It's cool that they're taking steps to like kind of kind of fix those issues with Bitcoin, the slowness and everything that you're just talking about, allowing them to get their money instantly and transact any amount, and taking care of those transaction fees. Have they considered using other coins on the blockchain, in the blockchain world, like Cardano or something like that might not have the same pitfalls that Bitcoin does?
So as far as I understand, they have not. And the reason for it, this is essentially just a Bitcoin law. This is not a crypto law. This does not apply to anything else. And of course, it is a free country. So anyone, living in El Salvador could purchase any of these currencies and, take their what is it, their gamble, if you will. But in terms of monetary payments, what happens a lot, and this is something that, depending on the circles that you interact with, there's different misconceptions or different appreciations in terms of what Bitcoin. Some, for example, some people that tend to think that these are, to put it somehow, limitations that Bitcoin has. From the other side of the street, some of these limitations actually end up being features, not bugs. Yeah, to put it somehow, right? And the reason why you would approach it that way is because, as much as it is expensive and it is slow to transact with Bitcoin in the blockchain, and the reason why it's expensive is because you're essentially validating through a proof of work consensus all over the planet, right? You're validating a simple transaction, so that takes resources. And however, that just that act, it also provides an incredible level of security. And that's something that, for example, other consensus algorithms might not share, and this is also one of the reasons why, right, I feel like a lot of financial institutions are going hard on Bitcoin is because the fact of, the fact that you can't upgrade easily, the fact that that it takes a lot of parts to move and to actually agree upon a change in the network actually is one of the things that keeps it steady, and it keeps it congruent to its own thing, right? You probably won't see much fork activity in the Bitcoin network. At least
fair point.
Not these days.
Mm-hmm. Me too. I'm curious, when you mentioned the need to get some oversight, just think about an international body. Like, is there some international body that's providing some oversight in terms of money laundering? Is there an issue with the drug cartels pushing money through this? I mean, would we know if there was? I mean, if the cartels were pushing the money through Bitcoin, would we know?
There wouldn't be an international body that would be regulating that as of now. As far as I understand, the IMF, the World Bank, they are not into cryptocurrencies. They are not into the idea that there's a monetary system that is an alternative to what they provide, that just runs on its own, that is validated in a decentralized manner, and that they can't manipulate or control. I don't think that they're very happy about losing control. So there isn't a particular international body. The reason the oversight organizations and security features that can be built at this point in this implementation have to do directly with the government. And since they do have, they are basically, in order to, as far as I understand, in order to create a Lightning Network channel, you have to provide liquidity. You have to provide the Bitcoin that is going to be in and out. So, like I said before, it seems like they are essentially, they're using this decentralized money. They could have created a centralized currency, and they could have just, made it up as they went. They chose to go with this type of money that they can't control, that really no one can control, right? That it just functions on its own, and in a sense, its robustness comes from the fact that you can't change it, that you can't manipulate it or upgrade it or all these different things, right? So it works as like sort of an insurance. And yeah, I think that was the question.
So, but going back to you said in order to use the Lightning Network, you have to provide liquidity. So like, just suppose I'm a cartel, I have a ton of money, but I can't really move it very easily. Would I be able to use this if I'm like this big drug guy and I've got like $1 million of cash in a suitcase here? Can I use this Lightning Network to get out of the country?
I mean, in theory, I believe you could, right? Like just as well as with cash. In theory, you would be able to, if you have a bunch of cash, first of all, you would have to turn it into Bitcoin, first of all. So you would have to somewhere buy Bitcoin. In order to do it through the Chivo wallet, the moment that you register, you have to verify your ID, right? You have to verify your account. So, probably not the best idea if you're a drug cartel. And also, if you do have $1 million, right? Chances are all of this is going to appear in some database, or it's going to pop up a red flag, because there is a certain body, there is a level of oversight that is happening with this network. The other, right, for example, in terms of taxes or whatnot, like the government pretty much can see how much money you've received and where that money has gone. So that's also interesting in terms of privacy. It's not particularly the most private. However, because they accept Bitcoin, you could also use your own wallet with your own Tor browser and your own protection, and that would still work. That would, technically function.
Right. So basically, it would only help me if I was able to. I still would have to have a fake ID to load it into the Chiba wallets and then transfer it to a Tor wallet and then take it out of the country. But at least I wouldn't have to walk with my $1 million through the airport, which is kind of a pain.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Technically, yeah. Yeah, I guess so. But you could also do that with like the existing banking system. Really, I mean, you can just deposit into an account in the Cayman Islands, and
Right. That is true. That is true. So yeah, so actually, so you have that visibility at the point it goes in if they're using the Chiba wallet. And if they're not using the Chiba wallet, they still have to do it their own way, which they could already do.
Correct.
Sounds like if they can adequately address all these concerns that people are levying against their use of Bitcoin and prove that like money laundering doesn't become a huge issue, then this will be great for the blockchain community at large.
Mm-hmm. I think personally that it already is, in a sense. It already, is providing a huge sense of utility for a lot of people that, like I said before, 70% of the country does not have a bank account or financial services. So all of a sudden, in order to, be connected, to be able to receive money from abroad, all you need is a smartphone, right? And a digital wallet, and you can, make payments. You don't have to be carrying all your money in cash. You could even actually have savings, because if you were to, for example, buy just Bitcoin, you have a separate, right? So you could spend, I don't know, $10 a week buying Bitcoin, dollar cost average your way in. And, over time that will turn into something, right? Most likely, I don't think it's unreasonable to expect Bitcoin from here to 5 or 10 years, being a lot more appreciated in price.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds like it's a lot safer on a personal level as well, because people don't have to carry around cash. Completely.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, cash can be lost, can be stolen, right? Can be misplaced. There's a lot of things that can happen to physical cash versus with a digital wallet. It's password protected. Obviously there are some risks in the sense that once you make a transaction, that's a cash final transaction. And chances are that there is a body that you can request assistance to or whatnot, but most likely once you made a transaction, that transaction is effective. So, yeah.
That's cool. So did you collect a lot of anecdotal stories, just from people who it made a difference to? Like, not everybody's using it, but from the people who are, anecdotally, was it important to them?
I would say so. I think, like I said before, a lot of people that I met personally had no idea really of what it was. Basically, they just see it as another form of like digital money. Essentially, the way that the government has chose to approach it is kind of like a cash app but running on Bitcoin. So it's a application that you use to send and receive money, and you can use to pay for services in any business. But I did meet a couple of people, and maybe it was related to the geographical location. It was this famous Bitcoin Beach, which is it was a project that started like 2 years ago. The reason why it's called Bitcoin Beach is because there was an anonymous donor that donated a certain amount of money. I don't know exactly the exact amount, but it was a certain amount of money that was then distributed to the community, and they were trying to create the first Bitcoin economy, if you will. But this was done in a very, it's like a surf town, a very, very small and very poor surf town. So they essentially gave businesses in the area the ability. They developed an app, and they gave, I think it was roughly the same thing, like $35 of Bitcoin to the people in the community and the businesses. So then they started transacting. Essentially, you injected money into this local community and give them the ability to receive and pay for things. And from there, in this town, there's a lot of people. I would say at least off the top of my head, like 5 or 10 people that I met that were extremely bullish, if you will, but very they have a conception of Bitcoin being this like store of value that in the future it will be worth way more than it is now. So they're seeing it as like an insurance or something like that for the future. So you just buy that now, and if you only use the money that you don't have that you don't need daily, because if you have to sell and the market happens to be low or something like that, then you're at a loss. But if you are just constantly putting money that you don't need, something extra, like I said, $10 a week or $5 a day or whatever that means for that person, that's not money that they'll need, and it's an instrument of saving that they've never had access to. 70%, again, that's just a wild number. 70% of the country does not have a bank account.
Wow.
So
well, that's really interesting. Have you seen, I'm sorry, go ahead, David. Did you have, I saw you seemed like you had a question.
Well, I did. Here we go. So basically, I was just thinking about beyond this, beyond just using it as a transactional thing and a store of value. Are they thinking about adopting other aspects of blockchain and distributed ledger technology for things like voting, file storage, identity storage, and education records, other aspects of government?
There is some information related to a project that the government is undertaking for digital identity for their whole population, but it's not along those ideological lines, of decentralization or blockchain technology, where for example, you mentioned Cardano or something like that. I believe one of their main projects is related to digital identity and whatnot.
Yeah, Atala Prism.
Mm-hmm, correct. It doesn't seem like that's one of the main points of interest at the time, for the time being, at least for the government. It seems like their most urgent thing that they want to solve with this, or the conversion, is most likely have to do with getting publicity. I mean, I don't know, personally, I have not heard of El Salvador, talks of El Salvador prior to this Bitcoin move, right? And now it's everywhere. It's pretty much, everywhere, anywhere, people that were not interested in what was going on there, or their history or whatnot, now are paying attention, because this is different. It's definitely a move in a different direction, but I wouldn't say that they're, as far as I understand, I wouldn't say that they're looking into other forms of utilizing blockchain technology for social projects or corporations or whatnot.
Well, I do think that publicity that they've achieved is probably going to be pretty good for them in the future.
I mean, just in the 2 months after right passing the Bitcoin law, their tourism was 30%, right? It increased by 30%. So that's, that's quite a bit.
Yeah, it's not
I'm sorry, but
insignificant.
I do have a bone to pick with that statistic, because that 30% can be explained by the relaxing on the limitations that we have due to COVID. Like we are comparing to the year before.
True.
Sorry,
Right.
I get bugged a lot about the statistics.
Oh,
So
sure.
that could be something that's influencing, and we are not seeing it.
I mean, I'm curious if you have any just knowledge from, what do people in Argentina think about Bitcoin, or do they have any thoughts that you know of about Bitcoin or El Salvador's usage of it?
Personally, no. I think Carolina was more current about what they think about it. I know she had a group that she sent the invitation to come today, but I'm not sure if they were available because it's a little late here, and maybe they're having dinner and stuff. As a country, I think we are really far away from the position that El Salvador took, because we are much more reliant on the dollar as a way of saving. There is a lot of issues. There is a lot of control from the government on the dollar and fixing the price and making it different with credit cards, and it's a whole issue. Also, we do have the debt to buy that are on dollars, but we still have the peso. Like we trust more the dollar than the peso because it's more stable. So I don't think that we are going to be turning towards the Bitcoin, because it's much more unstable and you don't know how it's going to fluctuate. And I'm not sure that's a risk that many of us are willing to take after all the problems that we have. But that's what I'm seeing and what I can interpret it with my perspective. You maybe can have another answer from Carolina.
Yeah. Katanga, are people in Nairobi using Bitcoin at all? I'm just curious. I don't know. I don't know if you can unmute. I know you're muted. No worries. You can do that another time. But yeah, no, this is. Well, I guess El Salvador we'll see how it goes. If it goes well for them and it's not, people start to do better in real terms in their lifestyles, then people will probably take note of that. I guess it's a little too early to see those kind of changes. I mean, and I guess you wouldn't know, Andres, unless you'd been there before, or your impression from the changes on the ground, whether beyond the government statistics. I think it's probably too soon to say if it's making an effect on people's lives in a significant way.
I would say that that the law, the Bitcoin law, probably is a bit soon to find out like what the difference is. But I will say that at least in at a anecdotal level from all the people that I interacted with, I would say that the vast majority of people are very happy to have the president that they do have. Like everyone, I think the approval rating, in fact, this is wild, right? Like at some point when after the elections it was 96%, and about now it's somewhere around 90%. Granted, right, these statistics are coming from the government itself, right? So that take it with a pinch of salt. But regardless of that, the fact is most people that you speak to were constantly telling me, like constantly telling me how the government had improved dramatically from what they've had before. You have to consider 4 of the last no, 3 of the last 4 presidents before this current president right now have been indicted for corruption and were found guilty in tribunal, right? So they've gone through the process and not just this is not a speculation. They were found guilty from committing crimes of stealing money, and lots of money, right? And all of a sudden you have this president that has actually done things for the people, not just in the Bitcoin aspect, but for example, there's a very famous, from the capital city, which is San Salvador, to the coast, there's a highway, or like a road, and that is in pretty good shape right now, and it looks like it works, it functions like a good highway. And I was told that this was a relatively new project that they implemented with government fund. Essentially, the government has actually done things to give back to the people. They've put a lot of emphasis in education. So they have programs for example, shoes for people, for the kids that go to school. They have a program for personal laptops for children. And these are projects that existed before. This is not that this government came up with it, but this government actually made them happen, versus prior governments that had the plans, but the monies were always like lacking. Essentially, they create a project, infrastructure project, and then the money is given to a private entity like a contractor or something like that, and then the project does not get built. It doesn't get finished because it's missing, a lot of people just stole money from it, but then that money was already spent. So now this project is stuck for, the next year or 2 years or whatnot. And this is pretty common. I mean, it happens all over.
Sounds like people have genuine faith that their new government has an interest in their well-being and is putting their money where their mouth is with it.
It really seems like it. It really seems like it.
That's so
personally, absolutely. I personally went into it very skeptical about the government because, you read a lot, right? Like the international media talks a lot about how, there's censorship and there's all kinds of things. But once you're actually there and you speak to actual Salvadorians that have businesses, that even people that don't, even people that are just doing what they can, they're trying to work and they're trying to get their everyday things covered. It seems like they feel like they're actually paying attention. Like the government has spent a lot of time and a lot of resources in like social media campaigns and stuff like that. Also like interacting with population, for example, people that have posted a video on Facebook, right, about some issue that they've had, some like house issue or something like that, and the government will respond to them immediately, and they will get, attention or money or publicity, things that you wouldn't see in other cases, that they wouldn't have seen, that would not have happened. Also, remember that in 2019, El Salvador was considered the murder capital of the world. They had a highest, I think it was the highest murder rate of the world, higher than Haiti, higher than, a lot of countries that are in a very bad shape. And this was mostly related to gang-related violence. And it's like been in the past 3 weeks or 1 month, they've had like 11,000 arrests of gang members, and the government has gone all out in this incredible thing that's going on right now. And you see, I personally see some of the photos and I see some of the things that are happening, and it's wild. It's it looks very violent and whatnot, but then there's this incredible support from the population, because these are the people that have been terrorizing the population. These are the people that have been ruling without being seen, right? Like they are being able to take extortion money from businesses. They've been basically doing whatever they wanted, and all of a sudden it seems like they've encountered a government that is not going to let them play that game.
Oh, that's really something. Because like when I talked to a refugee from Guatemala, and just for fun, I asked her when she's talked about the gangs, like, did you try calling the police? And of course, she just laughed. She was like, the police are the gangs. It's like, why would you ask me that?
Mhm.
And so I guess maybe they've somehow figured out a way to get the police less corrupt. Maybe they're paying them more.
You know, yeah, exactly. Generally speaking, that is, you know, it tends to be the case, right? In places where there's a lot, like a high rate of corruption, there's always someone you can pay. There's always some way of getting around these type of things, but I'm not really sure, to be honest. It initially, what happened was the government made like a truce with the biggest gangs of the country, and the violent crime was reduced by like 60% in just the first year that the president took over. But it doesn't seem like they're in a truce right now. Like it seems like they're on a all out, you know, conflict, and you know, every, you know, couple of days you're seeing news and things happening related to this, and how they're you know, before, for example, in the jail system, they used to have separate jails for one gang or the other. So for example, if you belong to the MS-13, right, you would go to one particular jail, and they would keep them apart. And what the government did now is they just put them all in the same, they just mixed everyone, you know, which weakens the gangs. It creates probably a little more violence for them, definitely, but it also, you know, doesn't let them organize the way they did. And it definitely destabilizes their operations from inside.
Wow, that's really interesting. Gitanga, I saw you put your video on. Did you have a thought or a comment?
Yeah, sorry, you called me, my mic had an issue. So my name is Gitonga. I'm from Nairobi, Kenya. So I'll speak on my take about Bitcoin and how Bitcoin is in Nairobi. So in Nairobi, it doesn't have a lot of restrictions. And actually the people who are having the bargaining power are investing in Bitcoin. There's no restriction to investing in Bitcoin in Nairobi, or no. But now the small scale, or the people who don't have that bargaining power, fear to enter the market because of the risk it has when yeah. But the ones who have bargaining power and the ones who are elite, they are going for it. And actually they're saying the returns are so good, and so many people actually have been driven to trade. So that is all. And actually it's so good because it's working out. So that's my take. Thank you. Sorry, my mic had an issue.
Yeah, no
Sorry.
problem.
You know, I think that's a really powerful point to make, that people that are experiencing instability and that paycheck to paycheck lifestyle probably have a lot harder time investing in anything like this and using anything like this because of that inherent instability and the fear that the floor might fall out from under them. I mean, they can't take that risk, whereas people that have a lot more can afford to, you know, lose 30% of their money one month and then have it be up 60% the next.
But it's interesting that it sounds like with the wallets in El Salvador, it's not a problem because they keep it stabilized.
That's exactly correct. So you know, if like the big picture idea would be essentially that the government is longing Bitcoin. You know, the government believes that Bitcoin is going to be worth more in the future, so they are okay with providing, you know, the liquidity for that to absorb that volatility, so people can use the technology without needing to be exposed to that volatility. So the government is essentially buying the Bitcoin and just accumulating, and you know, they're providing the cash so that people can just receive US dollars directly, and you know, and take it from there. So that does remove it. You're completely correct, David. You know, if you are making, you know, $200-300 a month, right, there's not a large percentage of that can be, you know, saved or spent in savings or in investment. This is not realistic.
Yeah, we are experiencing a lot of that here in America too. I think 60% of people are living paycheck to paycheck here as well. So experiencing that same kind of financial turmoil.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But this was fascinating. We could just keep going. We actually spent the whole hour already. Sorry, go ahead, Andres.
I was just thinking, did you, I did see that, so this whole technological implementation that El Salvador has basically done was all done through a company, and I think they're actually based off of Chicago as well, but they're a company called Strike for payments. Essentially, they're like like I said before, like a cash app, but through Bitcoin, you know, they use Bitcoin and it's through a Lightning Network company. So they recently, just last weekend, they announced at the Bitcoin conference in Miami, which happened literally last weekend, that they partnered with Shopify, which has a lot of services. They partner with Shopify. They've also enabled Lightning Network transactions through Twitter. That those are a thing. You can send cash through Twitter via Lightning Network, so you can send, and it basically functions in the same way. You know, it's the same thing, the same idea behind like the wallet that El Salvador has done. So, for example, if I were to use Strike and send David, you know, $10, I would debit my bank account, right? It would debit from my bank account to Strike, and then that amount of money that I want to send, I would just send it. It gets converted to Bitcoin, being sent anywhere and at no cost, and then David receives it, and it's the same thing. So essentially, you're removing intermediaries. You're removing the need for Visa, MasterCard, for all these like service providers that are actually providing a service, but they need to be paid for it, right?
3% is really steep. I've been thinking that for a long time, that's just an incredible take on people for just doing anything.
It really is. It really
That's
is.
awesome. No, I need to use Strike. I've been meaning to switch to it, because when I send Bitcoin, it's expensive. No, we're going to switch to it this next pay round.
Absolutely. Sure. Absolutely.
And Antoine, I know you just joined. We're actually kind of wrapping up because it's been an hour, but I wanted to give you a chance to ask any questions you have. Andres provided a ton of great information. We've been recording it, so you'll be able to see the talk. Did you have any kind of final questions or thoughts here?
Unfortunately, I missed most of the conversation, but thank you so much for tweeting about it. That's what reminded me that I was, should stop working and join the call. On the point of Stripe, and they are fantastic. And I thought that Shopify was an obvious choice for them. I didn't see the Twitter one coming. I think the next thing that would be exciting to watch is to see it unfold with grocery stores, because most of the US pays a lot of money for credit card usage at grocery stores, or at least the stores themselves pay that fee. And so they could make a lot of money if they implemented that on their side. Anyway, something exciting to pay attention to, but thank you so much for the discussion.
But no, this is super. We didn't actually do anything in Spanish. So maybe just for the wrap up, Andres, do you want to just give a line or two in Spanish, kind of summarizing just a few high points just for a minute or two, and then we'll just call that a wrap.
That sounds good to me. Bueno, en español ahora para que estemos todos en la misma. Un par de los puntos que tocamos son la implementación del Bitcoin como moneda de curso legal en El Salvador. El gobierno creó una aplicación, una cartera digital para uno poder tener su Bitcoin separado de su US dollar. Entonces, cuando tú haces algún tipo de transacción, lo que está pasando es que tú tienes una opción de, todo el mundo tiene, a través de la ley de Bitcoin, todo el mundo tendría que poder recibir tu pago, sea que tú quieres pagar en Bitcoin o con dólares. Pero la diferencia sería que cuando tú al recibir, tú puedes elegir qué quieres recibir. Entonces puedes recibir, por ejemplo, dólares en vez de recibir Bitcoin para no estar expuesto a la volatilidad. Y de esa manera también hacerlo funcionar. Entonces, estamos hablando de un país que tiene 70% de la población no tiene acceso a servicios financieros y no tiene acceso a bancos. De hecho, les saldría demasiado caro mantener una cuenta corriente, ya que tiene costos de operación, claro, tienes que pagar seguros, tienes que pagar un par de cosas ahí que son parte del costo. Entonces, cuando te abren esta posibilidad, la idea es que con un teléfono celular tendrías acceso a poder hacer pagos internacionalmente y localmente para servicios y bienes. Y eso es bastante, es bastante grande.
No, this was super. And I have to tell you, this really opened my eyes to what's happening, because I was also very skeptical, just because I'm a skeptical person. And I actually operate more on trust than on trustless. And since I trust your take on actually talking to people, it causes me to have a little more trust in that trustless system. So, yeah.
Amazing.
All right. I think that's a wrap. Anything else from anyone?
I'm just very heartened to see the world working towards helping the people that need it. Sounds like that government change has been a really good one over there. So that's amazing.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. All right. Well, thank you for the good news. And yeah, we'll put this out and see what happens next. So thanks so much for your time.
Thank you for your time. I'll catch you on the next one. Take care.
Thank you, everyone.